Hi guys, I'm Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing my October reading wrap-up. October was a pretty good reading month for me. I read 4 fantasies, 2 thrillers, and 1 Gothic horror. And out of the 7 books I read, there was only 1 book I wasn't too crazy about. So stick around to hear all the books I read last month. The first book I read in October was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and I was a little nervous going into this. I saw on Goodreads and BookTube it was getting a little bit of hate, and I actually really ended up enjoying it. So the story follows Galaxy Stern, or Alex, and she can see greys, which are really ghosts, and it's caused her to have this really traumatic and depressing life because she can see these ghosts and no one really believes her until she goes to Yale University. And when she goes to Yale, she discovers that there are all of these houses that practice magic, and there's this whole group of people that believe that there are these greys or ghosts around her. And she's actually considered special because not everyone is born with the ability to see ghosts. So she is taken in by the Ninth House. And the Ninth House is responsible for policing all these other magical houses to make sure they don't use too much power. And I really enjoyed this book. I didn't realize it was a murder mystery. There is a murder that Alex has to solve towards the beginning of the book, and throughout the book she's trying to figure out what house is responsible for this person's murder. And I really enjoyed it. I will say there's trigger warnings for sexual assault, drug addiction. There is one scene in particular in the beginning of the book that was really rough to read, but it was still pretty good. The main character is a little over-the-top angsty. Some of her dialogue is a little cringy, but I think it was supposed to show that because she had such a tough life growing up, that now she has this I don't need anybody attitude. And once again, not Leigh Bardugo's best character, but I really didn't mind her too much. The pacing was my main concern with this book, or my main issue with this book. I was so engaged in the beginning of the book, like the first 150 pages or so, like I was just flipping through, but then towards the middle, it kind of started to be a little bit of a lull. I ended up switching to audio format, listened for a little bit, and then switched back to physical reading for the last 50, 60 pages. But overall, I thought it was an enjoyable read. I love a good murder mystery. So I'd probably rate this 6.5 out of, 6.57 out of 10. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Fireborne by Rosaria Munda. I ended up really enjoying this book. So the book begins with a revolution. This ruling tyrannical class is overthrown by this new, more peaceful regime. And one of the children of this tyrannical class was named Leigh. And Leigh is sent secretly to an orphanage. And in the orphanage, Leigh meets Annie. And Annie is this low-born girl whose parents were killed by Leigh's family. Although they have this really upsetting backstory, they end up becoming friends and they have this beautiful relationship. And they slowly work their way up to become dragon riders. And dragon riders are the protecting group, essentially, of this new regime. They patrol the city and they ride dragons, which is awesome. And Leigh grew up believing that he was always going to become a dragon rider because that's what his family did. And he's always dreamt of this, and he just wants to really show that he can be a dragon rider. And Annie grew up as this lowborn girl, and she wants to prove to everybody that you can be lowborn and still ascend the ranks and become one of the leading people and most glorified people in this new regime. So everything's going great for both of them. They're both possibly going to be in the top spot to be like the leader of the Dragon Riders when someone from Leigh's family shows up and wants to overthrow the new regime. So Leigh has to decide, is he going to side with his family and go against this new regime that he's been raised pretty much in, or is he going to side with the family he's been raised in and kill his family he was born into? And then you have Annie, who has to decide, does she really trust Leigh? Like, she grew up with him, but she knows that he is the child. She's one of the only people that knows that he is the child of this tyrannical class. And it's really good. I really enjoyed this. And I wasn't expecting to, just because it's so filled with politics. Like, all of the action is from the politics and the intrigue. And even though there's dragons, and the dragons are awesome, it's just not really what's driving the story. And I also love that somehow this author was able to make both of these governing regime and groups morally gray. So like they both think they're doing what is right, but really like there's issues with both forms of government. Like neither one is great and just. And I really, really enjoyed it. There's also a decent amount of believable love triangles, which I feel is such a hard thing to do. There's 2 of them in this book, and they both come off believable and natural, and it's hard just to do one in a book and come off good. So props to the author for that. But I really, really enjoyed it. I would probably give this book 9.5, 10 out of 10. I can't wait to read the sequel. I already pre-ordered it. So let me know in the comments what you think, if you really enjoyed this book, if you've read it, because I love it. Also, if there's any books that have a similar feel to this as far as political intrigue, I think I want to look more into that. Maybe that is my thing. So all in all, loved the book. The next book I feel like all of BookTube and Goodreads has been talking about ad nauseum, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I'm going to keep this super brief because I feel like everyone knows what this book is about at this point. It's about Adeline, who, in order to escape an arranged marriage, makes a deal with a devil or god after dark and ends up getting eternal life. But not only does she have eternal life, she also is forgotten by everyone who meets her as soon as she is out of sight. And more than that, she can't make a mark on the world. So she can't write, she can't draw or anything. As soon as she makes a mark, it's immediately erased. And there's also a little bit of a love story here. It was so good. It deserves all the hype it's getting. I loved it. The writing is beautiful. The prose are amazing. I actually read this when I was sick, and I remember being downstairs. I had a fall ambiance going on, and I had like a hot cup of cider, and I was just reading this book, and it was such a cozy, good time. The one thing is, I was talking to my husband after I finished this, and after I closed the book, completely finished, I wasn't sure why, but I didn't love the ending. And I kept saying to him, I was like, I don't know why. I love this book the entire time I was reading it, and suddenly, as I finish it, like I'm not crazy about it. And I couldn't put my finger on why I hated the ending. And then I saw Daniel Greene do a review. I'm gonna link his review down below because he goes much more in depth than I'm about to go. But it's the last chapter. I hated the last chapter, and I 100% agree with him. Had it ended without that last chapter, I think it would have been easy 10 out of 10, no question. But because of the last chapter, I think I'm gonna give it a 9.5 or maybe a 9. I hated that ending so much. I just feel like it ruined the tone of a lot of the book. I don't know, but overall, still good read. 9.5. Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Next up, we have Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. So I've read a few books by Riley Sager, pretty big fan of his work, does a lot of mysteries, thrillers. So this book is about a girl whose father wrote about their house being haunted when she was younger. And the father becomes famous because of this book. It kind of follows her throughout her adult life. And when her father dies, she goes back to this haunted house to see what really was going on. Is it fact or fiction? Was the house really haunted? And just try to discover a little bit more about this house. And I really enjoyed it. It was a very fast read. I think I started this on a Monday and finished it by Wednesday or Thursday. So it was really good. It was really captivating. I loved the story. It was some parts of it were a little simplistic. I didn't love the main character. I feel like she kind of made some really dumb decisions throughout the book. And there were some characters that were just a little off. I love the haunted house premise. There were parts of this book that I actually was really freaked out by and had the lights on. Like I was reading in the dark. I was like, I gotta turn the lights on. I don't know what's going on here. But really, really good for like an October read. So overall, I enjoyed it. Probably give this a 5 or 6 out of 10. I feel like there was probably 1 or 2 twists too many, which brought my score down a little bit. But still, definitely a fun October read. Next up, we have The Guest List by Lucey Foley. I didn't like this book. I was not crazy about it. I think in my book haul, birthday book haul, I compared it to Agatha Christie. I was wrong. I don't think it's anything like Agatha Christie. But it follows a bunch of people. You get a bunch of different perspectives as they're going to this remote island for a wedding. And you're really just kind of getting to know all of the characters throughout more than half of the book. And then somebody on this island is murdered and you're trying to figure out who was the murderer. And it was fine. I feel like somehow it was both predictable and completely unrealistic. Like I kept saying, I really hope these things don't connect this way. And every time I did, that ended up happening. And I'm not trying to say that I'm really good, like really not good at solving mysteries. I'm normally really late on the uptake, like Home Before Dark. Did not see any of those twists coming. This one, I called every single twist. And there was a group of characters who all were at this school together, and they're adults, and I'm in this age range, and they just act like high school frat boys, and I couldn't get over it. I just hated reading about their characters. There's one perspective that anytime I was in their head, I was like, God, I can't wait to be on the next one, into the next character. But not a fan at all. I also feel like I need to avoid books about weddings. It just gives me severe anxiety. So that's my own fault. But I would probably end up rating this a 3.5, 4 out of 10. Definitely won't pick up. I actually did just order another Lucey Foley book. I do think she is a good author, so I'm gonna give her another shot. But yeah, not my favorite book. All right, the next book on my list is Mexican Gothic by, I forget her name, Silvia Moreno-Garcia. Next up is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I really, really enjoyed this book so much more than I thought I was going to. So this follows Noemi, and she's living in Mexico City, and she's living this great life, and then she gets a letter from her cousin who has recently married this Englishman and moved out into the middle of nowhere. And the letter is saying that my husband's trying to kill me, this house is haunted, you need to get over here. And Noemi's father tells her, like, look, you need to go save your cousin and go see what's going on. So Noemi goes over there, and like I said, this house is in the middle of nowhere. The setting is so, I can't even describe it. It's this Gothic, angsty house, and I just love the way it's described in this book. But anyway, she sees her cousin, and her cousin is like, oh, ignore everything I said in that letter. Nothing's really going on. I just had tuberculosis. I was delusional. So Noemi doesn't really believe that and decides to stick around for a little while and figure out what's really going down. And like I said, loved this book. I thought the Gothic dark elements were so good. I will say it was a little slow to start. I didn't really get into it, but once I got into it, I was like turning the pages. It was so good. I listened to this on Audible for the first half and then finished it, like I said, couldn't stop turning the pages, in physical copy for the last like 100 or so. And there's some dark and disturbing scenes in this book. I was not expecting it to be as dark as it was, but it was really good. And I think I'm gonna look into some more Gothic works. I heard Rebecca was really good. I haven't seen the movie yet, so I think I'm gonna watch or read the book, then see the movie. But if there are any other good Gothic horror books you can recommend, please let me know down in the comments. I really want to give this genre a shot. The last book on my list is The Year of the Witching by Alex Henderson. I actually started this book in September, but ended up DNFing it. I think A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout came out, and I really was waiting to read that. But I picked it back up in October, and I was really happy I did. I really, really enjoyed it. It follows Emmanuelle, and she lives in this really patriarchal cult, essentially, known as Bethel, and she's completely ostracized from from everybody. Her mother was a witch, her father was an outsider, and she's really looked down upon in this community. She's also a woman, and women in general are just really looked down upon in this community. So she's pretty much just trying to live her life, and then she goes to the dark wood. And these witches give her her mother's journal, and her mother's journal says that there are going to be these plagues. And all of these plagues begin happening to this town. And Emmanuel kind of has to decide what to do, what's right, what's wrong. And it's a really, really good story overall. I will say there were a lot of lulls that I kind of felt bored. It took me a little bit to read this. There was a romance that I wasn't expecting that I really, really liked and enjoyed reading about. There was also a very dark scene. There were a few darker aspects that I wasn't expecting going into this that I actually kind of appreciated. I think it pushed its messages. It has a lot of feminist messages in there, and I think it helped push those. So overall, pretty good read. I'd probably give it 6.5, 7 out of 10. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed my October wrap-up. If you've read any of these books or have any recommendations for a book I should read next month, please let me know in the comments. As always, I post new videos every Tuesday, and if you can, please hit that subscribe button and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.